All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the China Uganda Research Network. We are a small research focused organization based at Makerere University Business School. But Joshua will tell you more about who we are and what we do. But yeah, today we are going to have a very special webinar, which is still under our China Uganda webinar series. We've been doing several webinars like these in the past. And, each time we have a webinar, we will host a speaker who will come and talk us through what they've prepared in relation to China Uganda relationship, or broadly China Africa relations. And then we normally, after the presentations, go into a Q&A session where our participants will be able to interact directly with the speaker. So in today's conversation, we'll be looking at China's non-interference policy, which many of you may be familiar with. It's about how China proclaims sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference, especially when it engages with foreign countries, especially like those in Africa. So this modality is the exact opposite of what many of us would agree is typical of the Western model, which is based on rights and governance. And right now as we speak, we know that there is a war in the Middle East whereby the United States has interfered. So this is the interference that we're talking about with a country's politics. It has used force to do that, but there can be so many versions of interference. However, this non-interference policy, as we all know, also raises questions, especially around regime stability. A lot of the times we ask ourselves that, does Chinese non-interference policy really reinforce regime stability, especially in weaker or smaller states? Allow me to use these smaller states to describe countries like ours, like Uganda. But also, we are always looking at, what does this mean for these sort of countries, especially when it comes to their governance, civic accountability, and also at the time when, we are really at a critical juncture. There's a tense political rivalry between China, for instance, and the United States and broadly the West. So, how does this non interference policy play out? So, these are some of the questions. There are, of course, many questions which we are also keen to hear from you later on. But before I invite the speaker, I would like to invite Joshua, who is leading our project at the Makerere University Business School, to tell you a little bit about who we are and the sort of work we do, and also how you can get involved with our project. As for me, my name is Joel Odota, and I'm from Uganda originally. I'm one of the founding members of this network, and I've been in Australia for the past 3 years. I was first at the Australian National University, where I did my Master of International Relations, and now I've just started my PhD also in the same field, and my research looks at China-Africa relations. And by the way, I was also in China for 2 years, where I got my very first master's from Peking University in Beijing. So I have a pretty strong connection to China, and I'm always keen to learn from people. The China field is an evolving field. It's also a recent field. Some people call it gray. And, we are learning every single day. So I'm always, part of these conversations. Joshua, in a minute or two, please tell us a little bit about our network. And then please go ahead and use your powers to invite our speaker, who I believe will not spend more than 20 minutes. And then we'll turn it over to our participants. So, like I said, we are recording this just for future references. Some people could have missed it, and they can use this recording to refer to it in the future. And if you have any issues with that, please feel free to drop off the call. And during the Q&A, you can raise your hand and I'll pick on you and you can be able to ask your questions directly to our amazing speaker for today. But also, you can also type your question in the chat and we'll be able to read those directly to the speaker. And also, just before I invite Joshua, I don't know if you will have the time to introduce the speaker. I'll just tell you a little bit about who we have today talking to us. So, Dr. Makotsi Alfred is from Kenya Methodist University, where he's lecturing, and he holds a PhD in diplomacy and international relations from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, also in Kenya. And his doctoral research actually looked at the role of international election observer missions in Kenya from the early 1990s. He's done a lot of work in academia, but also professionally. He's a very established speaker. I don't think I have the time to read all of his profile, but you might have seen read about the speaker already during our advertising of this webinar. I'll also do copy and paste his bio in the chat so that you can read it for yourself just to save time. Joshua, over to you. And thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you very much, Joel.
Yeah, there he is. Yeah, we can see you clearly.
Thank you very much, Joel. I hope
also had as introduced, my name is Joshua Mbambwa, the Dean Faculty of Management at Makerere University Business School. We're happy to
Sorry, Joshua.
Yes.
You've got two devices and their microphones are on. So can you mute the one that you're not using and just have one on, please? Because we're getting a bit of feedback. Thanks.
Okay, I've done that. Open.
You're now clear. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Alfred Makotsi, for giving us another opportunity to hear from you, to share your expertise and your knowledge on the subject. This is Uganda, China-Uganda Research Network, a network that was created to ensure that we share impactful knowledge, we exchange ideas and discussions on pertinent issues that promote China-Africa research. And so we normally have experts, we have scholars such as yourself who are hosted at webinars and podcasts to share interactively. So we are honored and we really happy to have you share your knowledge on today's topic. And we shall be very delighted to have each of your colleagues interacting with our presenter. Maybe I'll make one announcement that this year in September, my faculty is sharing a conference, an international conference here in Kampala. So please, if you're interested, you can be part in September 22nd. Even at that conference, we have issues concerning China-Africa relations. So I invite you to be part of that conference so that it is another avenue of sharing and discussing pertinent issues that can promote Africa in general. With those few words, I thank you, Joel, for this opportunity, and also I invite Alfred to take the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good evening. I think for Joel, who is on the other side of the world, and many others. I hope you can hear me clearly, right? You guys can hear me clearly, Joel?
Yes, we can hear you.
Please.
Great. Great. We are going to delve on a subject that entails China's non-interference principles and its implication for political trust and regime stability in Uganda. As you've been told, my name is Alfred Makotsi. I lecture international relations and diplomacy at Kenya Methodist University in Nairobi, Kenya. So we're going on to the background. According to realists such as John Mearsheimer and Walls, they look at the three vitals of a state, which is survival, sovereignty, and integrity. These are the heart and soul of a state that every state seeks to protect. Even what is happening in Iran right now, Iran is trying to protect its survival, its sovereignty, and its territorial integrity. Uganda has a population of around 48 to 53 million, with a GDP of around 50 to 55 billion USD. That is according to World Bank. It is a presidential system with the executive dominating so much. It has multi-party elections with major parties such as NRM, NUP, DP, FDC. Regionally, it is a key pillar in ESC, a very important member of AU, in fact, a founder member of AU, being involved in peacekeeping in countries such as DRC. In terms of the ethnic composition, it's comprised of Bantus, Nilotes, with a slight minority of Kushites, and it holds a very geostrategic identity as a peacekeeping contributor, also a BRICS ally. When you look at the partnerships since 1962, when Uganda got into its independence to present, its foreign policy has been swinging from the west to the east, right from the Obote regime in 1962, where there were socialist leaning, mostly leaning towards the United Kingdom at some point. Then we came the Amin period between 1979 to 1986, when we had the Nordic, World Bank, IMF, also Israeli coming in during the Amin period. Then came the Museveni period from 1986, where they solidified their ties with the West. But in the recent times, we've seen the foreign policy of Uganda more aligned to the eastern side. That means they align more with China, with India, with Russia, and the BRICS countries. But what is China's foreign policy? China's foreign policy is based on three cardinal pillars. These are the 5 principles according to the 1954 doctrine, which pushes for mutual respect, non-aggression, non-interference, protection of co-interest, and Xi Jinping's thought. So the non-interference principle actually is a cardinal pillar in China's foreign policy, and Uganda-China relations has grown over time. Since 1971, when China, Uganda backed China when it wanted a seat in the UN. Uganda supports the one China policy. from 1986 to 2000, post NRM, we've had very deepened relationships between Uganda and China, with Uganda supporting UN human rights support. Also, we have Road and Bridge Initiative, currently projects going on in China. From 2010 to 2026, we are having Uganda take a very central stage in FOCAC, also in Road and Bridge Initiative. The critical view of this comes into the triangular debate of non-interference. There are those who argue that non-interference enhances African policy independence. The second group of scholars argue that non-interference strengthened authoritarian regimes by shielding them from accountability. There's also those who argue from a strategic realist point of view, who say that it's a pragmatic foreign policy tool advancing China's geopolitical interests. We've had so many studies talking about non-interference vis-a-vis debt dependency, vis-a-vis authoritarian enrichment, and many others. But very few studies have looked at how non-interference actually contributes or does not contribute to regime stability and political trust. And that is where my research comes in, where we are going to find useful knowledge on how the policy non-interference can either contribute or not contribute to political trust and regime stability. This research will help build on the academic foundations in theory, also in the shifting multipolar world. Is going to inform policy with actors such as government and regional organizations who want to shape their foreign policy towards the non-interference leaning. We are going to adopt a state-centric pragmatism philosophy that is going to be based mostly from the Confucian point of view and realpolitik, rooted in Deng Xiaoping and Lee Kuan Yew tradition, which prioritizes sovereignty, regime stability, and adaptability over ideology. And according to this talk, regime stability is contextualized as the sustained continuity of Uganda's governing political order without violent or unconstitutional transfer of power, while political trust is contextualized as elite-level diplomatic conference sustaining long-term bilateral cooperation. And we are going to angle our thoughts on the Tianxiang system theory, which explains the global order based on harmony, coexistence, and stability emerges from relational legitimacy and not coercion. Also, moral realism, according to Yang Xiongtong, which argues that power includes moral authority together with reliability, and trust grows from consistent, predictable behavior. But also, we are going to look at it from an angle of African governance, and this is where a Ugandan scholar called Dani Nabundere comes in, who argues that indigenous African governance prioritizes sovereignty, communal continuity, and stability. And on to my findings, first of all, on non-interference vis-a-vis regime stability. I analyzed Uganda in two phases. The phase between 1962 to 1986. And this phase, you will find that Uganda had very deepened ties with the West. And when I talk about the West, I'm talking about UK, Europe, the Nordic countries, and it had very limited relations with China. And what do we observe in this period? The period between 1962 to 1936. This is the period where Uganda had most coups. It had, at some point, it had disagreements with Tanzania, almost, or going into war with Tanzania. And when you look at the coups and counter coups in Uganda, you will find a hidden hand or a projected hand of Western allies trying to impose regimes into the Ugandan political systems. And when the regimes don't agree to their conditionalities, they remove the regime and place another one. And the second phase from 1986 to 2026, you will find that China deepened its ties with Uganda, mostly leaning with the non-interference doctrine. And from this period, we've not had any coup in Uganda. This is a period of 40 years. And since 1986 to date, we've not had Uganda engage into or engage in a major conflict. The last I can remember is when Kenya and Uganda were literally claiming Migingo, which did not translate into an armed conflict. It was just a conflict which was resolved using diplomatic means. On to my second finding on non-interference vis-a-vis political trusts. You'll observe that during the first phase from 1962 to 1986, where Uganda had very deepened relations with the West, with very few areas of cooperation with China, there was no political trust in terms of the Uganda-China relations. But in the period between 1986 to 2026, where now Uganda became a central pillar in China's foreign policy, we've seen high-level visits. For example, Hu Jintao, who was vice president then, came to visit Uganda. We've had Wang Yang in 2018 and Liu Gonzu, who are high-level CPC officials coming to Uganda. We've also had Uganda aligning in the UN voting system, especially between 2019 to 2022, where Uganda opposed Western-backed motions on Xinjiang. We've also had deepened participation of Uganda in the FOCAC meeting, where Uganda is seen as a pillar being used to mobilize African countries, and this signifies long-term development. We've also seen Uganda engage in very strategic alignments together with China. This is in terms of BRICS. Last but not least, we've had joint bilateral commissions, which signifies diplomatic trust, this according to Cohen. We've also had joint military and security cooperation. This signifies an advanced level of political trust. So the key finding here is that non-interference has enhanced the political trust between Uganda and China. The key takeaway is that China's non-interference doctrine significantly contributed to the growth of political trust, and this is evidenced by high-level visits, UN voting alignment, FOCAC participation, BRICS engagement, bilateral commissions and military cooperation. And on non-interference and regime stability, China's non-interference correlates with Uganda's post-1996 regime stability. The pre-1986, which was characterized by deep Western ties, saw interference, coup, and conflicts. And the post-1986, where we had deepened China ties, shows sustained regime stability. Overall, let me just read it. overall, non-interference serves as a stabilizing mechanism, enabling trust alignment. Sovereignty emphasizes sovereignty emphasis and non-conditionality fosters political confidence through high-level exchanges, multilateral alignment, and strategic cooperation. And this aligns to all the three theories of Xianxian, which relates to regime stability, moral realism, which relates to political trust, and Africology, which emphasizes that African political governance system prefer stability, sovereignty with mutual respect of ties. And overall, state-centric pragmatism aligns with the conclusion by explaining Uganda's preference for sovereignty, respect for partners. It frames non-interference as a pragmatic choice that safeguards regime stability and strategic autonomy. Thus, China's predictable non-intrusive engagement fosters political trust and stability. So what are the recommendations? From my own point of view, I'm encouraging African countries to prioritize sovereignty, respecting partnership by cultivating ties with actors that align to the non-interference doctrine. Also, regional actors such as ESC, IGAD, AU should embed non-interference into their protocols in terms of foreign policy, and major powers should adopt sovereignty-sensitive diplomacy to enhance their bilateral ties. They should also avoid excessive conditionalities and shift to dialogue over coercion. And also they should leverage on non-interference as a trust multiplier. Thank you so much. That was just a brief of my presentation. I welcome any questions.
Wow. Thank you, Alfred, and thank you for this amazing presentation and for keeping the time as well. So now it's time for our participants to engage directly with you in a Q&A. I remember two of the participants already emailed me their questions. So they are like some early bird questions, which I was able to pass them on to the speaker so he can act on those ones first as we wait for the rest in the audience to also raise their questions. But also I would like to use my moderator privilege to throw one question to you, Alfred. I like your presentation, but I'm just keen to know how unique of a case Uganda is, because I do not know of any cases on the African continent where China was actively involved in, interfering or safeguarding a regime. In other words, Uganda has also been engaging with the West alongside the Chinese. Actually, if you look at how Uganda balances the relationship between the West and the Chinese, you'd also see that the West is not entirely out of Uganda. They are still a big part. Sorry, I think someone's microphone is on. Sorry, I'm gonna have to mute everyone else except just the speaker. Please stay muted unless you're speaking. Yeah, so I was just gonna ask how unique of a case Uganda is, because also from your presentation, we would see for sure that China's influence only started in the early 2000s. That's when they became closer. So I wonder what would have happened during all of these times when China wasn't as close to Uganda. So if you can just respond to those, but please start with the two questions which I emailed to you, and mine is only bonus. I mean, I would rather give the chance to our participants to engage with you first, and if you've got time, you could respond to my question, which I hope you've got. I hope I was clear.
Yes, you are very clear. I would prefer that I start with your questions, and the questions that came earlier. You can ask on behalf of those who sent, so that I can also respond to them. Responding to your question, it is true that the West has not left Uganda, or Uganda has not left the West. But compared to the period between 1962 to 1986, and the period between 1986 to date, China's influence is rising from 1986, with the West influence actually not really declining, but I think they have maintained the same level of cooperation, but China has deepened its cooperation with Uganda. Coming into the unique case of Uganda, this was analyzed vis-a-vis the different coups and counter coups that have happened in Uganda, and actually, from my research, it was evident that the Western powers by then, who were major bilateral and multilateral partners in Uganda, held a hand in the different cases of instability that were happening. And coming from that point of view, Uganda prefers engaging more or deepening more with a partner that does not interfere with their relations. It means that if the West actually does not interfere with Uganda's internal politics, it means they would be competing at the same level with China with regards to deepening of their bilateral ties.
All right, thank you. And please go ahead and respond to. I can read the two questions that came through by email. So the first one was from Dan. Dan says, I have two questions for our speaker as follows. How does China's model compare with IMF, World Bank conditional lending? Then question number two from the same person. How does China's engagement affect conflict dynamics in fragile states? So do you want to take those first, and then
Yes. Let me take those. China's model actually is more of an economic relation with Uganda, meaning that, for example, from person to person, if I want to sell to you bananas, I want to sell to Joel bananas in his home, I will not come to Joel's home and ask what is if he's paying fee for the children, or if he's taking care of the wife, or so it's more of willing buyer, willing seller from an economic point of view. But the IMF World Bank model comes with conditionalities around human rights. We've had Uganda being directed on issues such as democracy, issues such as gay and lesbian rights. So Uganda chooses to align more with a partner that does not direct its internal politics, or does not interfere with its internal state of affairs. That the conflicting nature of IMF World Bank relationship vis-a-vis China-Uganda relationship. On to the second one. Just give me a minute,
Okay.
I look at it.
So it says, how does China's engagement affect conflict dynamics in fragile states?
In my research, I didn't find a case where China has been deeply involved in the conflict dynamics in fragile states. For example, an example of fragile state, I will talk about what is happening in Eastern DRC. We've had concerns about militias being funded by foreign powers in order to exploit the minerals in Eastern DRC. And when you look at the situation in Eastern DRC, you will see Chinese mining, or you see Chinese agents of China in Eastern DRC, but you'll not see Chinese citizens who are being used as military agents. Last year, there was a video clip that was moving around when the situation was escalating, and you could see soldiers from, I don't know which specific country, but you could look from their physical appearance that they were coming more from Europe, like, but we can't see Chinese, quote unquote, militias or soldiers in the eastern part of DRC. I've not found any documented evidence of such. Even in the Ugandan case, where we had a problem with Kony and I think in the northern Ugandan side, we've not seen a hidden hand of China. So China does not really involve itself in conflicts that fragile states in Africa are in now. That would be my take.
Thank you. But can I also suggest that China is a big contributor of troops and police in the UN peacekeeping, including in the DRC, in the MONUSCO. Actually, there are close to 3,000 Chinese peacekeepers around the world where the UN is involved with peacekeeping. And 2/3 of those are based on the African continent. I'm not trying to draw any connection to regime stability, but also I would like to suggest that they are privately owned paramilitary organizations in China that can be hired. Like, the Russians have got the Wagner Group, for instance, which is a paramilitary group or organization. Their job is, even you, Alfred, you can hire them to provide security for your company or for your business. A lot of countries have got those. So we might need to be clear on those. There can be foreign mercenaries on the ground, but that may not mean they are affiliated to the state, even though sometimes the line between the powers can be blurry. For instance, for the Russian case, actually the Wagner Group is very, very much connected to the Kremlin, and now they've been rebranded as the Africa Corps. So those are some of the dynamics I just wanted to also raise. So you can take on the other question, and then I'll come to Shara. I've seen your hand, and I just wanted to recognize that we will pick you after the current questions have been responded to. So this is from Robin. The first question, or unfortunately, is asked 3 questions. I don't know if we can respond to all of those now, but what I'll do is I'll pick the first 2 and then leave the last for now. And if there's time, then the speaker will come back to that. How about that? So his first question is, which international relations theory best explains China-Uganda relations? Realism, liberalism, dependency theory, South-South cooperation, etc., etc. Then the second question is how does China reconcile its non-interference policy with growing and expanding global strategic interests? So in other words, I think the participant is trying to ask, what's the line between interference and non-interference? Is it truly non-interference, or there is a bend? China can sometimes bend according to what its interests are. I don't know if I'm trying to translate that right, but if the speaker is here, they can also clarify it. But those are the two questions we'll pick for now, and then we'll come to Chiara and Joshua. Over to you, Alfred.
Yes. In terms of the three theories, I think the best theory that explains China-Uganda relations is realism, clearly driven by interest. China has interests in Uganda. Uganda has interest in China. So it is incumbent upon each of the state's diplomats, diplomats in Uganda and Chinese diplomats, to navigate a way in which they benefit out of this relationship. Of course, China is a major power and Uganda is a developing country. So theories such as dependency can come into picture, but the core theory that explains this relation is grounded on realism. The second question, the thin line between non-interference and
Strategic
bending.
interest.
Actually,
Yeah.
actually, the bending or taking, allowing water taking its course in terms of foreign policy, that is what Chinese refer to as non-interference. So long as they are able to pursue their interests in your country or in your state, they won't really interfere with what is going on. So it is incumbent upon you guys to make it conducive for them to come to your country, so that the relationship now becomes a win-win situation. Even in situation where countries have moved from being stable to let me quote in quotes unstable. China still maintains the bilateral relations, for example, in the Sahel states, where we see the African Union suspending them from attending the summit, ECOWAS actually expelling them or suspending them. We've had them maintain their relations with China. So non-interference is actually the bending according to the level in which or to which they can achieve their interests.
So in other words, you're saying it's non-interference based on what China wants. It can interfere. Is that what you're saying? If it has to?
No. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it can never interfere.
Yeah,
Even if their interests are threatened, we've not seen a case where they cannot interfere.
Awesome. All right. We will balance it up. We'll take Shara, who is going to speak, and then we'll get back to the other questions in the chat. Not sure if I pronounced your name right. Shara Rossellini.
Hi, Chiara. You pronounced it well enough. Hi, everybody. You can hear me, no?
Yes, loud and
Okay.
clear.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chiara. I am from Italy and I work for a European Union project in China. And I am very interested in the African vision on China's action. I mean, China's action, China's relations with Africa, because from what gets fed to me on my news, on my LinkedIn, for example, is usually the European Mzungu kind of idea that China is like a problem in Africa, but I never actually heard anything from like African perspective. So thank you for organizing this kind of conferences. I think it's really useful. I wanted
Thank
to
you.
ask I wanted to ask a couple of questions regarding this non-interference, because as for my education, I have always been told this approach that the Western powers usually have with Africa, which is usually like, oh, you do this, but you need to like comply with, I don't know, civil rights or all of these things. Okay. I just wanted to understand if you feel that if the West would be would be working with this non-interference kind of approach like China, you said that it would be a partner at the same level as China, so a partner that you would be more, from my understanding, more comfortable facing. And regarding, I remember somebody mentioned something about LGBTQ, like lesbian and gays rights, which is something that I deeply care about. But I do understand there are different cultural awareness and cultural positions over this topic, which I will not go into. I just wanted to understand when does the non-interference logic, how far does it go? Because I also know that China has difficulties with upholding civil rights regardless of the sexual orientation, like for example worker rights, which I think is also something that would be good for both China and countries in Africa to work on. I wanted to understand if you think that if you see China as like an example of this,
Sorry.
somebody that you can learn from, or do you think that it's also possible that there is something that you just are not interested in listening to anybody else on this topic because it's your own country and your own approach to how to solve your own problems. I just wanted to understand this because from where I stand, how I was educated, we have a completely different approach, and I want to understand your approach to this and your understanding on this. I hope I was clear. I'm sorry. I didn't write too much about the question. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. Just to give a little bit of a background on sorry, Alfred, for interfering on the
No problem.
LGBTQI, because I'm coming from the Ugandan perspective. So in May of 2023, the Ugandan Parliament passed the anti-gay law, which imposes very harsh punishment for gay relationships or marriages, with some actually leading to death sentence. So not long after that, we saw a lot of responses from especially Western capitals. The World Bank suspended loans to Uganda, even though it did not cite the that particular law, but it mentioned gross violation of human rights as their justification. We also saw that the IMF did not renew their loan commitments for Uganda, also around that time. And in that same month of May, President Joe Biden also launched an investigation on Uganda, especially in response to human rights. And not long after that, Uganda was also suspended from AGOA. You might be familiar with AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is a trade agreement between the United States and selected African countries that allows, free movement or trade, tariff-free trade between the U.S. and these countries. So Uganda and a few other countries, Gabon, Central African Republic, and others were also kicked out. And what was the other one? So yeah, there were so many responses around the same time, which can make you really connect these responses to the gay law. And then for the World Bank, they gave Uganda conditions. And actually, recently, there's been a news that the World Bank has now resumed funding for Uganda because it had given Uganda conditions to work on its human rights issues. Probably I don't know if they did any amendments on like the law itself, but probably there's been a lot of diplomatic conversations. We've seen the Ugandan delegation go to Washington several times. So yeah, so that's just to give you a bit of a context. And I think Alfred, you can now take over. I hope our two questions were clear, and after that, I'll go back and read the other questions in the chat. Thanks.
So, Shara, thank you for your question. I would want to answer it comprehensively in terms of Western interference vis-a-vis Chinese non-interference. Africa comes from a very unique background. What is, for example, right to, according to the Western world of view, is very different from what is right from the African point of view. For example, the Western liberal democracy cannot be really copy-pasted from the UK now to the Kenyan context or the Ugandan context. Our countries are composed of very different ethnic communities. Some of our boundaries that were drawn by colonialists have divided communities. You will find communities in Kenya, the same communities also in Uganda, but now they are a minority in Uganda. But from this point of view, you will find even before the Western states came into Africa, colonialism to date, African communities were existing. Human rights issues were being taken care of. For example, it was not right for you to murder or kill, even in let's say 1901 in the Ugandan context, maybe Lango or Acholi, it was not right. At the same point of view, Uganda had its own system of governance. We had the Buganda Kingdom. So when you try to copy-paste the Western liberal democracy or Western way of life to the African context, in view of interference, that is when the African states or the African communities, the governance system, try to resist by nature. It is not in our quote unquote DNA that that who would allow maybe let me put it in context. Gay and lesbian rights in the African context is something that majority of the African population does not support. So if you impose it on it, tagging it together with loans or trade, it is something that Africans will be willing to forego if they have another partner. But if they don't have, just like Uganda never had between 1962 to 1986. They would abide by those rules, quote unquote, or regulations. And in terms of can African states learn from China? I think they can learn from China because even when you look at the economies of African states, which are more inclined to the capitalist way of constructing the country's economy, they're not working. That is why you will find the African communities contributing to build a church or build a school, but you can never find them contribute to build an industry. So, in terms of learning from China, we are not saying that all the Western ideas are bad, but we should contextualize the Western ideas to the African system. For example, the way Chinese has conceptualized Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics. We should also have capitalism in quotes with African characteristics, or maybe socialism in quotes with African characteristics, or any other system contextualized to the African way of life, African nature, and African communities that have existed from, I think we are the oldest human beings according to the fossils that were found in Turkana. So that would be the context of China's model and what African states can learn from it.
Thank you. Thank you.
One thing that I wanted to ask just to conclude my question, because given all of this context that you have given, which I absolutely understand, and I'm really happy that we can have these conversations in this day and age, because I think it's very important, especially from an Italian perspective. I really wish. From a Western perspective, I really wish for all of this conversation from African perspective to just be out in the world. So thank you. I just wanted to understand when you say that in all of this background, all of this almost coercion of Western values, and we say or human rights, LGBT rights, and with all of this background, when you say if Europe, for example, because I cannot speak for the USA, for example, I do not want to speak for them, but if you say that the West, if doesn't have any like string attached in terms of like policy or laws or whatever, do you think it would still be considered as at the same level as a partner as China? Because I have lived in Zimbabwe for a year and I heard a lot of, and again, I'm not an expert. I heard a lot of very interesting opinions on this, that they are just happier to work with Chinese people, regardless of the non-interference policy that they have, but also because they are just a different kind of like people that don't have any baggage related to the African history and how horrible our impact was on the continent. So I just wanted to understand if it's actually true that we would be at the same level from an African perspective. Thank you.
Yes, you would be at the same level, but I want to admit that the Western Europe and USA have a lot of work to do in Africa. I think the position they are in now is because they have held, quote unquote, the economic world economic power for long, and Africa is so much dependent on Europe and USA. But when you look at from an honest point of view, and you would have a Chinese diplomat and a US diplomat or a diplomat from the EU countries meeting African heads of state, you would of course have, first of all, the Europe and US have quote unquote historical things to clear with us. From slave trade, from colonialism, the way Western powers took took a lot of our resources to develop their countries, and at the same time, and then right now they're coming with conditionalities. So you would be, if conditionalities or non-interference is stopped by the Western powers, of course, you would compete with China from a favorable point of view, but you will have a lot. You still have a lot of work to clear the historical baggage that your ancestors left in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. I think she's very satisfied with your responses, I could tell. Thanks, Alfred. And also to our audience, we were meant to stop this we're already 5 minutes into our time. So, Alfred, if you could just spend, less than a minute to run through the questions that we have in the chat so that you don't have any baggage carried forward. Yeah, as well. So I think we will take Joshua's question. And for Mr. Ruben, I think you asked so many questions, three of them. I think two were answered. I hope those will do for tonight.
Could you
Let's
read Joshua's question?
Yeah, I'm gonna read Joshua's question. Joshua is saying, what was China's role in Uganda's past coups?
I didn't find any hand that China had in coups that happened between 1962 and 1986. But I found a lot of literature that was saying that the likes of Obote, Amin were being supported by UK and other powers to actually take power to advance the interest of the countries that were putting them into power. So unless if there is knowledge that I didn't find, you can share, but I didn't see any Chinese hand between 1962 to 1986.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to find such because the only things that we always come across is during the independent struggles in Africa. At some point, at some stage, China's support for African independence was visible, and some of the infrastructure projects that China supported, like the Tazara Railway, as part of, the independence struggle, is always cited as, some of China's sort of alignment with the African continent during the colonial time, like in the independence struggle of African states. But yeah, I think that's it from the chat. Unless there is any burning questions, as for me, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone. We may not have answered all of your questions elaborately, but I think that the presenter has done a very, very excellent job to not just present his research, but even more importantly, to engage with you face to face in the Q&A, which is, to me, is always, it's my very like it's like the more important part of our conversation. So I would turn it back to the speaker to just, say his very final words, and then I'll invite Joshua to close it. And also, as a call to action, if you've got any research and you'd like to share your findings, or it doesn't have to be academic, like we are not just for scholars. We are about, sparking conversations. As long as you can back your conversations with evidence, I think that would be good enough for somebody within our community to learn from. So just reach out to us. We've got a website, www.chinauganda.org, and we are also visible on social media. Particularly, we are on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. But you can also send us an email to info@chinauganda.org if you would like to speak, right? Otherwise, thank you so much for taking your time to listen to us, but also to engage with our speaker. And Alfred, would you like to say your very final remarks, and then I'll invite Joshua to crown it up.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share what I was looking at for the past 1 month. And second of all, the subject non-interference is very key in the current global geopolitics. We've seen what is happening in the Middle East. You would imagine we are from different countries, but in as much as our presidents sometimes go overboard, it would sound, I don't know how the Iranian people are feeling in terms of their nationalism when a head of state, in as much as a dictator is, when a foreign power actually strike your head of state and head of government, I think it leaves a country in so much confusion. So we as policymakers, as people in academia, and as diplomats, we should try our level best to encourage that if there is any internal issues within a state, they should be solved internally, the way the Iranian people came on the streets, and they are now, I think their protests have now been hijacked by US and Israel. They can now no longer go on the streets to protest, because the missiles from US will also strike them. So non-interference is a very core subject, and as African states, we should strive to our level best to ensure that we remain sovereign, we remain independent. Thank you so much, Joel, for your time. Thank you so much, Joshua, for always hosting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Joshua, please.
Thank you very much, Joel. I would like to take the opportunity to appreciate Dr. Alfred Makotsi for his interest in China-Africa relations. I'd like to appreciate all the participants on the call who have spared time to make a discussion on this very critical subject, China relations with Africa. We believe we should continue interacting and bringing the debates, the running debates at a time for discussion, so that we can improve the well-being and the impact of China on Africa and the other way around. So thank you very much, and let's continue the debate on our different channels of communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.